Hello there from Toronto. How are you today?
From Toronto, the great, what do we
Yes,
call it? It's the big apple, the big orange, the big
this
grapefruit
and
fruit.
my mother's peach-colored couch here is what I'm sitting on
I've
today.
got to say, I really like it. Well, I'm I'm kind of excited about it. By the way, is it as cold there as it is here?
It went down to about, of course, we're recording this before it goes to YouTube, a couple of
Yes.
weeks or so. It actually bottomed out rather cold for Toronto. It was minus 15 when I got up this morning. So,
Yikes.
yeah.
Well, let us warm ourselves up with some nice memories. For those of you who are old enough to remember the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, we're going to jump into our own Wayback Machine straight to December 8th, which is a few weeks ago. That was CJAD's 80th birthday. And Yvan and I, of course, we have deep roots with this station. With today's guest, the legendary Rob Braide. Rob's resume is longer than Tolstoy's War and Peace and all of the Harry Potter books back to back. Chair of Studio Bell at the National Music Centre, tied to the Canadian Broadcast Hall of Fame, Stingray, Astral, Standard, CHOM, CJD, you name it. He even hired me back in the 80s despite a resume that belonged to the fantasy section. And of course, you met him early at Carleton when
Yes,
he quit
Carleton University.
CKCU 93.1 some
Hmm.
50 years ago.
Hmm.
The marvelous, the wonderful Rob Braide.
Rob Braid, let's bring him in. I don't know where he is. Where does he live now? Do you know?
I think he's up in the mountains somewhere.
Oh, okay. There he is.
Up in the
I'm not,
mountains.
I'm not exactly in the mountains. No, I'm in hi Yvonne.
How are
Uh,
you?
I'm in Saint Hippolyte, which is kind of in between. I guess if you're driving up the 15 North, you can go Sever, Saint Agathe, Saint Adele, or Saint Jerome. You take the Saint Jerome. It's about 20 minutes north of Saint Jerome. So
Oh,
on est boisé, mais
yes.
on est pas loin de Montréal en même temps.
Good for you. I'm up in Saint Eustache, so not too far from where you are.
Not too far at all.
I'm
How's
in
Um,
everybody?
Rosemont, far away from both of you.
Yes,
there's
as
there's
far as you
there's
can get.
there's so much stuff to cover here, Rob. I'm gonna kick it off here. When your name came up the other day, first memory for me was CKCU at
That's right.
50 years ago, Robert, in November of this year. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah, there was a big party to celebrate the 50th a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't make it because it was an ice storm. And driving from here to Ottawa along Highway 50, pas évident. So I missed it, which is too bad because
Yeah.
yeah, that was the beginning of my career. And I went to Carleton specifically because you had to be a student to be involved in the campus radio station, CKCU. And yeah, we put it on the air 50 years ago. And 2 years later, I left to join the all night show at Show.
I remember the trials and tribulations of trying to get that tower up on the Arts Tower. Were there not machinations that went on with the CRTC and all sorts of things?
Oh yeah, I mean there was the establishment of a commercial policy, which was the biggest deal. Randy Williams, our fearless leader, and Craig Mackey, dearly departed. We all went to the CRTC and said, "Listen, we're the first student voice to ask for a commercial FM radio license in Canada." The station in Winnipeg at their university as well was asking, and they went on the air a little bit later. But they gave us a limited commercial policy, which they called it, and it basically said that we weren't allowed to use any quantitative or qualitative statements, which means we couldn't say anything was good or inexpensive or whatever. So it was just sort of sponsorships,
Right.
and it did cripple us. But we made it on the air, and the station's still on the air. A guy named Junior Smith, who does a show called Reggae in the Fields, I put him on the air when I was program director there, probably in 1973 or 74, and he's still on every single Saturday and hasn't missed one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Because it was a carrier current operation before that,
It was a
obviously.
carrier. It was a carrier current operation, which means that excuse my husband's bad. Which means that the only way you could get it is if you plugged your radio into an electrical faucet somewhere in the area of the university. And we had a little box of a studio with a microphone and a couple of turntables. down in the bowels of the art center, and finally we got the money together to build the studio up in the arts tower.
It's quite something. Yeah, so just to be a bit more clear, the electrical wiring would carry the signal to an outlet. So you
Precisely
needed
that. Well,
an
you were doing
electric radio, right? It
well,
plugged
you were
in.
doing your degree in journalism
Yeah.
in the same building, but
Yep.
no, actually, you were across the quad, weren't you? Journalism, was it in the arts tower?
It was the Arts Tower. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we were in the Unicenter, so across the quad. So when you were doing your thing, you would any newscast that came would come by wire into the Arts Center, into the Unicenter, and then on the air. Yeah, those were the days.
Yeah, and then we went to air, of course, once you got this thing on the air. Radio news journalism back in the day with Joe Scanlon and company, and
Scanlon, that's right.
live shows, and Rick Clough. I was thinking about Rick the other day. He left us a while back.
Yeah.
He was one of the ops there, and yes, I remember. And Rob Braide's name was always sort of in between the various bits because Rob made this possible, and he did that, and he got this done. So it was quite something. Era, I'm sorry, I'm taking up your time here again.
No, it's fun. It's fun to hear this part of Rob's history. For me, when I came to Montreal, Chaume was the it station. It was also the station where all the cool acts from all over the world wanted to come to. So whether it was Genesis or the Police, Midnight Oil, and I remember I sent Rob a package which was very unusual. I wanted to get his attention, so I sent him this envelope with my resume with green sparkles in it with some blue balloons attached to it.
Very.
And he actually called me in, and he was very kind because to say that my resume was a work of fiction would have been, I think I had worked at CFGO at that point in Ottawa at the Go 14, and I worked at CBC Lanark, but everything else was just, But you got me in there, and I was so excited. Chaume was the it station to get into, and you were really good too. Because at that time, there were not a lot of women on the air. I remember when I was working at CBC Northern Services, and my boss, I asked him if I could do a show, and he said, Era, women, if you order dinner, men are the steak and you're the fries. And I said, yeah, but people order fries more often, honey.
Really?
Yeah.
It was a lifelong objective of mine. I'm just trying to get all this sun out of my face. I don't have some blotchy disease. So my mother was an art historian, did her Master of Fine Arts at Concordia. She's been dead for 37 years, but she was a woman born before her time, and she ran into a glass ceiling very early in her life, and I was always upset by the fact that she couldn't progress, and have spent most of my life trying to sort of advance women's careers and positions in boardrooms and on management groups and on the air. I remember when I arrived at CJD in 1987, Melanie King and Joe Cannon were doing the talk show, the midday talk show. And I looked at the books and I realized that Melanie was making half what Joe was making for the same job, exactly the same job. So I took Mel out for lunch at the Ritz, and she was highly suspicious. The natural reaction. New kid on the block, programmer from Chaume FM who clearly didn't know what he was doing. And I said, listen, Mel, I'm going to double your salary. She said, what? I said, well, you're doing the same job. She couldn't believe it. And she said, well, I'm not sure you want to do that so quickly because I'm pregnant and I'm going to have my first child. I said, well, that's great. Why don't we put a microphone into your living room and we can change part of the show to childbearing and child rearing issues. And we did. It was wonderful. And, it's always been an objective of mine. And people like you, Era, and Erica M., who showed up at Chaume as well, who I've just recently been on a podcast with Jill Deacon, recently, about a year ago. What men have to do as managers who find themselves with not enough women around is you have to identify unbridled talent and talent which is a brick flying through the air. And you were always one of those, Era. You always had new ideas. You weren't afraid to make a fuss. You weren't afraid to walk in a room and take it over. And you did that in studios. You did it in meeting rooms. and you did it with your ideas, as Erica M did, many other women that I've had the pleasure of working with. I'm the chairman of the board of the National Music Center in Calgary, which is a center for music in Canada, $200 million building, 2,000 instruments, 14,000 school kids a year go through the place. Architectural wonder, nmc.ca, for anybody who'd like to check it out. It's beautiful. When I got there, the board was a bunch of old white guys. Well, me now, I'm an old white guy, but that was 13 years ago. I was a middle-aged white guy. And it was unilingual. So what I did is we made it bilingual. It was one of the conditions I made of taking the chair. And then gender equality was my next step. And we made the board gender equal. And then we lost the gender equality because we ended up with more women than men on the board. And, these are the kinds of things I'm not blowing my own whistle or tuning my own horn, but these are the kinds of things that need to be done. And we need to address BIPOC and LGBTQ, 2S plus issues, not to become the kind of woke organizations that people like Trump and Hegseth decry, but rather to look more like our country. And, we look more like our country if we have more women in places of authority and have more women in places where they can make decisions and bring other women in. So, I mean, long way of answering what you said, Era, but it's always been important to me and always will be. And, with a 25-year-old daughter who's just finished McGill Law this year, it's going to be an interesting challenge for her. She's going for the Ontario Ministry of Labour after she finishes her bar this spring, and we'll see what kind of challenges are ahead for her as a woman.
Oh, mazel tov on that. I'll pick up after that and go back to Rob Braide at CJAD, who took a chance on me and had me fill in for George Balkin. Remember that?
Well, you had the chops.
I had, and Glenn Repaw, God bless him, was producing. And I think you pulled me into your office one day after I think Glenn and I were doing Power Drill Day or something like that, or some strange opera and power drill day or something.
I don't want to go there.
And then of course Rob it's always very diplomatic and quiet, and it's always you want to come in here and have a little chat. But I remember that as if it were yesterday. But those were good times, and my goodness, do I miss radio? I can't tell you how much.
You don't miss the kind of radios out there now, Yvan.
No, I don't. And I know we're going to get into that a little bit later, Rob. But no, I miss those radio days for sure. My goodness.
I miss the days where we had a ghost in the building. In fact, I think we have a picture.
We have some photographs here. Let me just pull up some of the shots that Aaron sent me.
I love the fact that we had the show Ghost. No other station had a ghost. And apparently, there it is. There's the door, and look at you.
Now, can you tell us who these people are there, Rob?
Sure. On the left is Bob Beauchamp. And on my right there, Bob is a legendary showman announcer who really got me going. I always followed him. I started off at 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. with actually Daniel Richler was the morning guy at the time, and Bob ended up leaving. He was music director because he and his wife Patsy wanted to travel the country in an old army vehicle with their kids. And he came back disenfranchised or disillusioned, rather, I'd say, from his trip and wanted his job back. General manager said, "No, sorry, you left. And we like what Rob's doing." So I kept my job. And on the other side is Mark Sherman. And Mark's first job was Rocky Raccoon. And he wore the mascot. And Mark ended up being a salesperson and opened up a company called Media Experts.
Oh my gosh!
Turned out to be a remarkable media buying agency, which he sold recently for far too much money, and had a great success. And that door is now up on the wall at Papineau and René Lévesque outside the Showham studio. It says 1355. and when we bought Shome from Chum back in 1987, the door was being tossed into a dumpster by previous owners, and there was a lot of anger amongst the staff that we were buying it because we had been competitors, and because we had transferred FM 96 to Mix 96, and we were eating Shome's lunch on an advertising basis because they'd kind of lost some touch with reality. So a bunch of us scooted over, rescued the door, and we made it into the door of the new studio at Shome, which we were building to bring the station down the street and put Terry and Ted into the morning show. And the architect, dear friend of mine, was really grumpy because the door was way off-sized. And he had to completely redo the front of the end of the studio, the air conditioning ducts. So anyway, the first morning we were on, coincidentally, Krista Berg was in town. And Chris had always been a great friend of ours. I've got a gold record over here for Krista Berg's Lady in Red. So Chris came in to sort of inaugurate the studio. And he continues to be a pal of mine and a dear friend of Terry DeMonte's. So anyway, Chris is walking down the hall towards the studio with his guitar, and he kind of stops and he kind of tears up. And I said, "What's up, pal?" And he said, "Without that door, my career would not have happened."
Wow.
And the people who used to walk through that door were amazing. All the bands that would come to Montreal, where do I go to hang out? Go to Shome. I'd have people show up at 3 o'clock in the morning when I was doing the all-night show. It was unbelievable. One night, it was what you see there is we're standing at the ground level of a 3-story Greystone. Production was in the back, sales. Next level up, Jeff Sterling's office, program director's office in the back, with a balcony and suspicious plants being grown. Third floor was the studio, and the one night the intercom buzzed and I said, "Who's there?" He says, "Mark Hamill." I said, yeah. It would have been 1977 when Star Wars came out. I said, yeah, I'm the Queen of England. What do you want? He said, "No, it's Mark Hamill." Really, I asked, I don't know, Mick Jagger or saying his name, some superstar's name. "I'm going to Montreal, Marshall." He goes, go to show him, hang around. Oh, a lot of fun. So I went downstairs, and sure enough, it was Mark Hamill.
Wow.
So he came upstairs, and we hung around. We played the music he wanted to play, and he disappeared into the gathering dawn. And that would happen over and over again. I mean, the first night I was there, the first day, an afternoon in September of '77, Mark Carpentier was on the air, and I was asked to go in and he could train me on the board, me shaking like a leaf, not being able to believe I got in this job. Well, there's me with David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. I'm over in the corner there. And Ian McLean beside him, and Vito Luprano, who ended up making Celine's life wonderful. There I am. It looks like I'm rolling something. So anyway, I walk into the studio. I walk into the building mid-afternoon. There's a power failure. The station was off the air. So I walk up, and I'm stepping over Don Henley and Joe Walsh and Glenn Fry, and they're all passed out in the stairs. And they'd played the night before at the Forum, and they'd partied all night long. And I said, "Excuse me, Glenn." Don sort of, "Could you move aside, please?" And, it was like Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band would come in. They'd all come in and party. And there's, David Gilmour came in, just hang around. And I guess a couple of those gold records you see behind you are around me here. And they were pretty heady days. And I kept in touch with David for a long time.
Wow.
We also used to play French. Oh, there's Pete Marier.
Pete Marier, Steve Anthony.
Yeah.
Steve Anthony.
Bad Pete. And Steve Anthony. That was at the Atwater Market a few years ago.
We also used to play, when I first started working there in the 80s, we were playing French music as well, too.
Well, it's a fundamental story about French music and show. I was asked to Serge Fiori's state funeral a few months ago. I got a formal invitation from the Quebec government and Serge's family. And Serge became a very dear friend of Terry DeMonte's in his latter years. And Serge always remembered me because what happened is Shome had a bilingual license when I arrived there. I couldn't speak a word of French. I'm now idiomatically bilingual. I've lived 70% of my life in French as a result of a number of events. But back then, we had this experimental bilingual license. And what had happened is we had started to play, this before my time, in the early 70s, Harmonium, Bodamage, Raoul Duguay, Gilles Variquette, Jean Dufresne, you name it. And the interesting thing was that none of the French stations were playing any of these artists. 70% of Chaume's audience was French then. It still is to this day. Francophones have long wanted to hear the operatic Brit rock opera, the Gentle Giant, Genesis, Supertramp, Styx, American, but you know what I mean, Christopher. So we played the French music alongside of that operatic stuff, and we all got together and played in the same sandbox. And there was a cross-cultural thing that happened that never would have happened if Chaume didn't exist. No. And it was the beginning. It was part of the Quiet Revolution. It was the beginning of the conversation between Quebec and effectively the rest of Canada. And I was the guy who went to Ottawa and applied to the CRTC for a permanent bilingual license. And we were turned down.
Yep, I remember that.
The reason we were turned down was because I called them the Gang of Four, the four French broadcasters, showed up as well and said, if Chaume was allowed to speak French and play English music, it will erode the French culture.
Yep.
Well, of course, we were in the middle of building the French culture, building the English culture. And if we'd been allowed to continue, we might have avoided a lot of the shit we're going through right now. So we were turned down. They weren't worried about the culture. They were worried that we'd be able to beat them with the advertising post.
Mm. Now, this picture here is the
I'm sorry. Yeah, this is CJAD, isn't it?
No, this is Chaume.
This is
Chaume.
Okay, no, the photograph we're looking at now, Rob, is
that's a 4th Street reunion. I'll tell you about that in a minute.
Okay.
So finish this story off because it's important. So we got turned down, much to the chagrin of Jeff Sterling and all of us. So at that point, we started to reduce the amount of French music we were playing. And Sequoia arrived on the scene and they started playing some. But much to the chagrin of the French broadcasters, the CRTC knocked on the door a couple of years later. And they said, well, if you're so concerned about the erosion of the French culture, here's the deal. You're now playing 55% French music. And they went, what? So the law of unintended consequences, and this is not just my theory, the Brontosaurus, but it's been covered in several sort of doctoral master's theses in ethnomusicology and sociology. What happened next is that there wasn't a great amount of supply of current pop or folk or rock-oriented French music. So all the radio stations, CKOI, CKMF, all those stations, they're all playing the same stuff. Very much like Canadian, when CanCon was put in, a lot of the English stations were playing the same stuff until the supply expanded. So what happened is that the French radio stations started building high-cost, well-developed comedy morning shows. Rock et Belles Oreilles came out of it. Ding et Dong, Les Frères Brass, Les Grands Gueules. All of these French comedy acts started developing as a function of the morning shows, which Sequoia and CKMF, for example, had to develop to differentiate themselves because they were all playing the same music. So then, and they were insanely expensive morning shows. Morning guys making $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 a year. Whereas on the English side, they were making 125 to, at the end of the whole evolution, the top morning guys in English Montreal were making $500,000. But what happened, again, the law of unintended consequences, is that the Quebecois comedy scene happened because the CRTC didn't let Chaume speak French.
That's wild. It's interesting how things evolve, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. It was interesting to be riding that saddleback in those days.
And these are the folks from CJD.
These are the folks from Mix, CJD, and Chaume. So this was every couple of years we get together and celebrate who we used to be. And as we all know, it's not what it used to be. And I happen to be speaking to somebody this morning as we're recording this, it's the 80th anniversary of CJD, and they're doing a good job on the air. They've got some interesting people on, and there's some interesting stuff to listen
But it's a
to.
it's a tough slog these days, isn't it? Though.
It's a tough slog, and by way of example, this person I was speaking to said that they didn't even send donuts and a cup of coffee around to the staff this morning.
Mm.
Wow.
The mothership in Toronto made absolutely no notice or recognition of this milestone. And there's a big party tonight. I wasn't even invited.
No.
Not that it matters a damn to me, but
No,
that
no.
was then. This is now. So these people, we all get together every couple of years and give each other a hug and remember what it used to be like.
Well, you can see there's Blair Bartram up front. There you are in the back. There's Al Gravel, Bilal,
Bilal and
Oh, there's
Kid
Al. Yeah.
Fraser,
Okay.
David
Yeah, I
Tyler,
recognize
and
Al. Yeah.
all sorts of people there.
Yeah.
Tommy. Well, that was and there was that handsome young
Who's
man.
this
What a great
handsome dude
studio
here
shot.
getting ready to record something? I got
That was an audio visual thing I was doing for the CI thing.
But you've had an amazing career, not only in radio, though I have to say that your effect on Montreal and Canadian radio is huge. But there's a lot of people who don't know that you could be on Master Chef. I can't remember how many years it was back, but you opened up. You love to. You are a gourmet cook, and you opened up a commercial. Oh, there's you.
This
with
is
Pag-
Pag, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And when he was inducted into the Canadian Walk of Fame in Toronto a couple of years ago. Yeah, I love to cook. I do something on Facebook called Tonight on the Cutting Board. There's me as well. I was the chief reviewing officer of the Irish Braide back in 2000. So every year I put on my finery and walk with all the people who used to be somebody, and so it's fun.
Now, I want to. No, I'm going to get into this too, Era. But please continue what you were saying.
No, I was just going to say that Rob opened up a commercial kitchen and was giving these gourmet cooking classes, which I think COVID did some damage, but Rob made his this is unbelievable. This is maple cured, maple smoked bacon.
Yeah. I opened up the commercial kitchen. I'm 72 now. I retired at 58. I was fortunate, and I went to Astral Media for a period after I left the radio stations. They owned the radio stations. They asked me to do a corporate job, and then I left them and went to Stingray, and I was VP of Content and Regulatory Affairs for a period of time there. And when they went public, I cashed in and retired. So I opened a commercial kitchen with my son. And lost my shirt on it, by the way, but it was a lot of fun. 5 years of spending every day with my kid, and we catered to caterers, small batch chefs, food trucks, that kind of stuff, and had a great time. We had a place up on Royal Mount, and at the same time, I'd been a charcutier for quite some time. I'd been making sausages and maple syrup cured bacon and lardon, etc. So we got into that pretty heavily. In fact, when we closed the place down, we were making about 700 kilos of bacon a month, and
Wow.
selling it at Cinq Saison, Latini, and places like that. So we got to a place where it was time to either scale up or shut it down, and I decided to shut it down because scaling up was going to cost too much money. And in terms of my situation, Santa's knee was getting sore, and so that was the end of that. But I do love to cook. I still make a lot of my own bread, and
That's I got to stop you right there because I bake sourdough, and there's a braidism in there too that goes back many years. I remember you talking about it. I forget where it was. I think it was when you were at CJD about how your procedure for throwing some water into the oven and getting all the steam in there going. And whenever I bake, you come up on very frequently because it's these little milestones that sort of stick to your brain. So
what fun! That's great. Yeah, steam's a crucial part of making bread. There's my lattice top pies. There's blueberry in there. I think some apple as well.
Beautiful. And des cannelés.
Les cannelés, c'est pas facile.
Pas facile pantoute, ça.
Non, j'ai expérimenté plusieurs fois.
These look delicious, by the way.
It worked very well.
And
And
these,
I make preserves. I think that's some of my. I
wow.
have a big garden out back of my place, which is about 37 feet long, 17 feet wide. Les clôtures sont de 7 pieds d'auteur parce que les chevreuils peuvent sauter 6 pieds.
Okay.
Puis, la messe, il y a 2 pieds dans la terre parce que les marmottes, they can go 1 feet down. So anyway, I make my Super San Marzanos and my garlic and my ginger and all that stuff. So
Wow.
I make preserves with that. I make a wicked bread and butter pickle, and I make a great coulis of San Marzano, and that's the stuff you see there.
And a country gentleman to the end. So all right. So you mentioned a daughter, 25, has graduated from law school, you said, yes?
Just graduating in the next week or two. She's doing
Okay.
exams.
All right. And
I've
how's
got
your
a
son
30
doing?
My son's great,
Yeah.
37 years old, has a place on the same lake as I have up here. And then I've got a 40-year-old daughter who's living in Toronto, married, and extremely successful. Did her degree in marketing at John Molson, and then I've got a stepson, Laurent, who's married, has just bought his second house, and at the tender age of 30, and has been successful as a urbanist in Montreal.
Wow. What a
Tout est beau.
legacy.
Tout est
I
beau.
just wanted you to tell this story because when I first started working at Showm, I was working with one of the guys that trained me was God rest his soul, Harry Schaefer, wonderful guy who left us way too young, and I was training on overnights, and that's when that door. I think I'm not sure if it was that was the door on the traffic room that we had on 4th Street, or if that was on Green. I can't remember where the door was, but anyway, Harry used to tell me that I if it ever got really cold in that room at night, and I swear one night I was working, it was just the imagination, or maybe it was just all the I forget who was in the studio before, but there's just no way that Lysol can get rid of weed. As he'd come in with this great odor of Lysol and weed, the days. And I remember that night, and it was my imagination, but it was I could feel this cold shiver, and I could swore to God I could see something reflecting. But there was someone who passed away in the old building, and I think there was an exorcism, right?
Well, I'll tell the story. It's funny. I was on another Zoom earlier this morning with some people from Newfoundland who were doing a documentary on Jeff Sterling, and they wanted to have a chat with me about a couple of these things. So I told the story as well this morning. So it came to pass that the old Showm building, 1355, we saw the door there earlier, used to be an antique store, and it was owned by Henrietta Anthony, whose family still owns the old Bank of Montreal building, the corner of Green and St. Catherine,
Oh.
on the southeast corner. So Henrietta's husband killed himself in what became the Showm Music Library on the 3rd floor. And when he did the deed, he was wearing a green sweater. Context. So fast forward, Showm moved in there. Jeff Sterling rented the building. We built it. They built it into Showm, and they moved in there in 1971, I believe it was. Having started Showm FM in the old 1310 Green building in 1969. So over the years, there were stories of the Showm ghost. There was a landing. There was a spiral staircase that went up to the 3rd floor. And there was a landing between the 2nd and the 3rd, which was a bathroom and a great big mirror. And people used to say that they would walk up in the middle of the night and they'd see a guy standing looking at them out of the mirror in a green sweater. So it was like, who? And I mentioned Daniel Richler, Mordecai's son, was the morning guy at the time that I started the all-night show. Daniel was freaked. A very superstitious guy, I guess. And he didn't last very long. So one morning, 3 in the morning, I guess. I had to go downstairs to get something. I came back up, and I thought maybe I saw something. I wasn't sure, but I threw that bag of herb away right away, um, and never bought from that guy again. So, so there were stories about there was a vending machine in the kitchen, and there were people who said they'd see a head on top of the vending machine and feet sticking out underneath. There were all sorts of stories. So anyway, came to pass that one day I was following Bob Beauchamp. He was doing 6 to 10. I guess I was doing 10 to 2, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Sorry, my asthma. Bob said, "Don't go into the music library because they're doing a seance, an exorcism." What? I said, "Yeah, they got a couple of priests and a nun or two and one of the administration people from across the street." Okay. So whatever, off I go with my show. It's about midnight. I need a record. And so I figured out midnight, they must finish their business. So I threw open the door to the stroke of midnight, and I went, ah! They thought I was the ghost. And they thought at that moment, there's some Ouija board or something set up. And they thought that they contacted the ghost just at that moment. And they all screamed and ran out of the room. I got my record, kept on doing my show. Well, we never heard from the show ghost again. And shortly thereafter, Jeff Sterling kicked us out of the building and moved us back to 1310. Now, our going away party, when we left the house, Mike Sinnell, dearly departed, collected a bunch of prosthetic limbs from one of our employees who had lost one or two limbs and had kept all of her old ones from. So he set up this whole sort of haunted house thing. And we had this wild party to close the building down. It was the last time we were in it. And the National Enquirer sent a photographer and a reporter. And my claim to fame in my entire career was that I was once on the front page of the National Enquirer.
Wow.
Wow.
I'm in 2 halls of fame. They mean nothing compared.
No. Okay. CAB. Okay. So tell us about Studio Bell before we wrap up here.
Well, Studio Bell is, I think it'll end up being the most important thing that I've done in my career, sort of extracurricularly. Studio Bell is a $200 million building in the East Village in Calgary. It'll be 10 years this coming July. 2,000 instruments.
Jammed on me there.
We have the Rolling Stones mobile recording studio, completely redone, new, used every day in its original analog state. We've got the audio console from the Trident Studios in London, upon which Queen recorded Bohemian Rhapsody.
Wow.
In fact, I was in the studio a couple of years ago with my pal Tom Cochran, and he was in for interview or something. And he stood there and he looked at it and he said, "Oh my God, that's the actual flanger that George Harrison used on My Sweet Lord." And in a beautiful old school recording studio, couches, big speakers, whole 9 yards. Next studio over is the console that the Sex Pistols recorded, Never Mind the Bullocks, their only album. Again, a full-blown old school studio, totally digital, totally analog. We have live rooms full of instruments. We have the largest collection of electronica almost in the world. It's a remarkable 14,000 school kids a year come through the place for programming. There's a performance space. There's a museum space. It's a great, great place. A lot of people, in fact, the Andy Kim Christmas show happened recently, and I asked Matsumi Takahashi, along with a couple of other people, to join us. And she looked over and said, "What are you doing this thing in Calgary?" I said, "Because they're not in Toronto."
Mm-hmm.
And we have a conversation. We've taken a space at the new La Disque building. La Disque is the organization which kind of regroups all of the publishers, songwriters, singers, record labels in Quebec. And they've moved their Hall of Fame to Calgary, believe it or not. We have all the Halls of Fame, the songwriters, Carrots Junos, and the CCMA, the Country Music Association. And
how often do you get out there?
Oh, 4 or 5 times a year, I guess.
Okay. All right. And you're still You're chairman still? Is that
I'm chairman of the board. I'm
sure?
probably going to leave sometime next year. It's been 10 years,
Okay.
and it's enough. But I'm still involved in a lot of stuff. I'm on the board of Talk, which is the English language rights watchdog. Talk, advocate, live in Quebec, formerly QCGN, and very active with them, with Sylvia Martin LaForge and Eva Ludwig. Leslie Roberts was on our board, but he had to step down because of having recently been elected to city council. Excuse me. And I'm chairman of the communications committee on the Montreal Irish Monument Foundation. In fact, I'll be having a meeting with them this afternoon, so I'm keeping busy.
It would appear that you are. Listen, just one last thing from me. You mentioned it off the top that one would not miss working in radio the way it is today. How do you feel about what it is today?
Well, I think the overreaching feeling I have about Montreal Radio Yvan is that the English community in Montreal is being deplatformed. We have fewer and fewer places to tell our stories. The Gazette is less than what it was. CTV News is less than what it was. CJD is less than what it was. There are fewer places for the Anglo community, which is vital to my existence. Even though I live 70% of my life in French and I live in, the country, I find that radio is like many other aspects of legacy media. Google, Facebook, etc. These digital platforms have sucked the oxygen out of the advertising business in Canada and indeed North America, but let's talk about Canada. I believe that it's not like there are evil old men sitting in an office tower in Toronto saying, let's destroy CJAD just because it feels good. It's difficult to maintain that level of excellence that the three of us watched when we were working with Gord Sinclair, George Balkan, and Ted Blackman. There was an advertising market that could support that kind of life.
Yes.
There's been chatter about, a bunch of people getting together behind the Montreal Gazette. You know what? I don't think it's going to happen because had I not had Mix 96 and Shome to chip into the infrastructure costs, the billing, the invoicing, the sales, the engineering, the physical plant, CJD would have faltered years and years and years ago. And by the same token, the only thing that's left in Montreal for the Gazette is the editorial staff. There's nothing else. Again, we're maybe talking out of time here, but this morning I saw Aislin's congratulatory cartoon for CJD's 80th birthday. It's being published the day after because the Gazette doesn't publish a Monday paper with any local content.
Right.
This is heartbreaking. CJD is struggling away. Chris Berry's doing a great job. He's looking after CTV News. He's looking after CJD. He's dealing with a limited cohort of people who do that. But there's some great broadcasters still there, but they don't have the critical mass of advertising. I think radio across the board, across Canada, I think that, the smartest thing Bell Media could have done was sold all those small radio stations a couple of years ago, 20 or 30 of them, because they were just repeaters and horrible little forgotten kids that have been bought by small companies who care about them, who love them now. And they're restaffing them and they're putting local content on the air. Some of them are using AI, to simulate broadcasters, and that's a solution.
That's a whole.
But
You notice, Era, I didn't bring it up. I didn't bring up
I know.
AI. Okay, we're not going to
good.
go there because we'll be on here another hour, and we'll let you go and get your inhaler there, Rob. So,
so anyway, it's a shame, but it is what
Yeah.
it is, and it's the march of time. And legacy media has got to learn how to stay as local and live as possible.
All right. You've been a mensch. Thank you very much for joining us today, Rob. Much appreciated. Joyeuse fête to you and yours.
À vous, Péréma, and we'll keep in touch, all of us.
That'd be terrific. Thank you very much.
All the
Thank
best.
you, Rob.
Ciao.